I don't know what the answer is to that question. We'll know at some point in the future when we have a large enough audience that is driving our revenue model to the point where we're making good money on it.
Would you sell it game by game?
We do. We do sell it game by game.
But I mean, down the road, I know you do now. Do you think that,
We may. I don't know at what point we say, well, you know what, we're not selling this game by game anymore because some broadcast network wants to pay us a lot of money for our rights. I don't know what that time frame looks like, but I will say that a good aspirational company for us is the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They have built that brand in 10 years, and they've built it on the back of digital. And if they could do it with what is pretty good content on their side.
And human cockfighting, of course. But
then we
Well, he's going to make that announcement for next season.
Right, okay.
Because our
Right.
content
Full
is every bit as compelling, so why can't we do that? And we're kind of taking a page out of that book.
Do you think that the sports fans today, you mentioned sports fans are not necessarily adopting their parents' sports teams. We also know they're not adopting their parents' viewing habits. Right. You know, the idea of sitting down to a game and I'm going to watch this game. It's more sort of, oh my God, this is happening. I got to tune into this right now. Do you think in 10 years we're going to have discovered just a completely different model for how people buy and consume sports? Because I have no idea. I honestly have no idea how my children are going to watch and consume and discover sports. And they're pretty old at this point. They're teenagers, but I just, I watch them. They don't even turn the television on. Everything is on their computer.
I mean, it's all about attention span. I remember, years ago when I worked at MTV was being blamed for like destroying kids' attention spans because it went from a half-an-hour show to a 3 or 4 minute video.
That was actually LSD that was destroying the attention span. The MTV
well, it was a combination of the two.
Okay.
So you had that sort of dramatic shift in attention span. But now, I was reading last week about how I think it's Fox has adopted the 6-second commercial because 30 seconds is too long. So we're living in a world where, how much attention can you pay to how many different things at the same time in how many different places? And I think that the brain is just being rewired. And part of the mission of a league like NLL has to be to both pay lots of attention and to lead and to experiment and to innovate. And that's sort of the beauty of all these platforms is, it's not binary. You can figure out what's working, and if it's working, you can step on the accelerator. If it's not working, you pull back. But it's not like sort of relying on a broadcast partner to show your game every week. And if the ratings start to go down, they start to cut promotion. You're not, at least you're in control of your own destiny.
Well, we're learning that now, Matt.
And how long do you think your game in the ideal as a media product, how long does it last?
It's a 2-hour competition window, but if someone wants to watch the competition, they've got to commit 2 hours. But that doesn't matter. They're watching it in all different ways. And you give an example, 60% of our viewership watches on mobile. That's a real change of how people are watching and consuming sports content. And I see it. I have an 18-year-old who is a diehard soccer fan, and he's literally watching 2 games at the same time, one on his mobile device and one on the big screen. And these are the habits that we're learning are becoming the future. And you've got to build your platform to accommodate. Your production quality changes. When you're watching on a small mobile device, you've got to pay attention to your production quality. So what I think you'll be seeing us do, and we're talking about it now, is changing up how we actually televise and produce the games. So that if 60% of our audience is watching it on mobile, got to produce them differently. So I think we're learning this, how this new generation is changing its viewing habit in real time, daily by broadcast.
And what do they tell you? I mean, you have this social relationship with them. It must be a two-way feed here. What do you hear from the fans about what they want more of, what they want to see more of? What do they want from the team? What do they want from the teams?
Again, that's another benefit of having this digital platform combined with a database where you have a direct-to-consumer experience. When the NLL was on a linear carrier or streaming its games on a linear broadcast network, we never knew who was watching us. Today, we know who they are. We have their emails. In some cases, we have their cell phones. We know their names. We know where they live. And we can create a one-on-one relationship with that consumer to ask him those questions and to get that information. And it's hugely valuable for a league like ours where we want to grow audience and we want to duplicate those viewers across a much larger platform.
And what do they tell you? Do they tell you, I'd like to see this better, I want to know the players more, I want to, I want better gear?
all of that. They love highlight shows, our highlights packages, and that's the one thing that digital allows us to do is to put out highlight packages. We've created our own studio in Toronto where they are constantly developing unique content, player interviews, a weekly show, highlight show. So the fans were giving us feedback that they wanted to see highlights, fast action, quick formatted action of our games wrapped up into a 30-minute show. So we produced that. It's called The Box, and it's produced out of our studio in right outside of Toronto. And that production studio also generates other, unique content. This year we put a POV camera on 4 players' helmets, 2 on each team in game. So we're capturing a lot of that content from the athletes in game, and we're putting that into our show, into our halftime features.
Is the goalie one of them?
No, the goalies don't have it. These are runners on the field, and we're experimenting doing that live in game in the future. So these are things that Brian alluded to that we have the opportunity to do unique stuff like this that maybe other sports leagues can't do or won't do or can't pivot as quickly as we can. So we'll be doing that in the future.
And one of the other things that comes out of this is that a lot of the audience that's just discovering NLL now doesn't distinguish it from another major league. They're looking at the quality of what these guys are turning out, and to them, it's indistinguishable from the NHL or NBA in terms of, this is my sport. It's not, this is a different quality experience than I'm getting from other leagues, so therefore, I'm going to think differently of it. They're investing in the experience in such a way that for new audiences, it's indistinguishable from sort of the sports that they're used to watching on TV.
Are there any questions from the audience yet? Anyone? I think we have microphones somewhere. If you want to raise your hand and ask a question. Why don't you are you hustling to, there's the microphone.
You mentioned doing a game of the week and obviously sponsors and what have you. And the league obviously looking for more eyeballs. Do any of the sponsors that you talk to come to you with their own marketing platform of how they think they can advance the league in terms of viewership and what have you, on top of the obvious dollars that you'd be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question and very relevant to our conversations with sponsors because now we have the numbers to show them, 380,000 on average. For our conference finals, we had almost 1 million people watch 2 games in our conference finals. What we're finding with a lot of the big buyers of sponsorship is that they actually have digital budgets now, where just a few years ago, they didn't even think about spending money against digital experiences. And the other thing I think you may have heard Brian allude to, a 6-second spot that the linear guys are toying with. Well, this generation, what I've learned is this generation, because I have a couple living in my house actually, and they're a pretty good focus group, but this generation, the millennials and the Gen Xers coming through, they don't even want to watch a 6-second commercial.
Neither do I.
Commercials.
That's not exclusive to millennials.
Commercials are passé today, and what they want to see is they want to see their product integrated into an experience. And a great example of it is, I went to a practice once. They have these shoot-arounds, and after the practice, the guys are stacking up soda cans on the wall of the boards, and they're having a contest picking these cans off. And when you see their accuracy, it's unbelievable. From 30 feet, 40 feet, they're literally able to get like 9, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 cans off the wall. And I'm like, that's a perfect little piece that we can do with a Coke or a Pepsi or a Red Bull. And that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a 6-second spot even anymore, or a 30-second spot. Those are passé. Sponsors want to see their products integrated into the experience to capture that wow moment, and it works.
And I guess, Brian, from your perspective, that these sports sort of lend themselves to those sorts of opportunities where there's not sort of this sacredness of the NFL field or what,
right.
or the property itself, and you can work in with the content that you're able to produce and connect with the audiences in this way.
Yeah, we can do that. And the other thing that the numbers that Nick's talking about are, to a sponsor, are big numbers. They're not broadcast TV numbers, but sponsors now are looking at having a deep relationship with vertical consumers who are interested in some specific brand, rather than just sort of a narrow relationship with a large number. And so what Nick is able to present is an opportunity to be the favorite sport for those couple of million people, as opposed to just one of a handful that they sort of care about. So it's the depth of that relationship where you can present sponsors opportunities physically on the field in the arenas, but then not just digitally, but even in the sponsors' social feeds and the sponsors' digital feeds.
And Nick, the relationship between the indoor game and the outdoor game here. I mean, I think a lot of us who grew up playing a little bit or associate lacrosse with an outdoor game. Interesting that you come from soccer, because there's long been there was long, and especially in the 80s, you said it reminded you a little bit of soccer in the 80s. There was a pretty strong indoor league at that point, or at least it was on television. We were aware of it. There wasn't an outdoor league at that point. What is going to be the relationship moving forward between indoor lacrosse and outdoor lacrosse?
Yeah, so from a commercialization standpoint today, from a ticket sales standpoint, the indoor game really leads the way, because we're able to sell a ticket to not just a lacrosser, small universe. The sport's growing, but it's a small universe. But we're also able to sell a ticket to an entertainment seeker, a sports person, an ex-soccer guy like me. I would buy a season ticket to watch this stuff, because it's the best players in their space. It's dynamic, it's physical, high scoring. It's exciting to watch. So really, there's very little comparison between the indoor game and the outdoor game. I guess the stick and the ball are the same, but that's about it in terms of what you're watching is very, very different. The indoor game, tighter space, more compact. It's 5 runners and a goalie. The outdoor game, it's much more spread out on a wider field. It's a little bit more akin to watching a soccer match. There's lower scoring. Indoor, there's just a lot going on in a very tight space. The skills required to make a pass 5 feet away with a stick, very high level skill, quality, versus 30 yards apart. So there's a lot of different nuances of the indoor game versus the outdoor game that make it actually easier to televise too, because you're able to get tighter shots and you're able to show the dynamics of the indoor game a little bit easier than the outdoor game. The outdoor game has some challenges to televise.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah. Right. Oh.
I believe there's
Hello.
one back there and one here. I'm not sure where the mic is.
I got it over here.
Oh, you got it. Sorry.
In the back on the right.
Hey, so Toronto Rock season ticket holder since the move to the Air Canada Centre. Love the game, and really admire the push into digital as well. Just curious though, as far as targeting fans outside of the NLL markets, what are you finding there, and what can you possibly get out of targeting fans across Canada, United States, and really globally across the world?
So it's a great question, and really, I'm not sure if this was luck or skill, but our decision to do a deal with Twitter really gave us an eye-opening experience. Roughly 70% of our viewing audience is in the US versus Canada, and we're a Canadian-born sport, as you know. I was expecting that percentage to be reverse. So, we've got 70% of our audience in the US watching box lacrosse, a Canadian sport, which was very compelling. And that gives us the decision point that we have to invest in more distribution in the US because there's more box lacrosse fans in the US to be had, we believe. So you'll see us investing more in two areas. We'll be looking at more distribution platforms, particularly in the US. But digital, again, no borders in digital. So whether it's Canada, US, or even internationally, what digital allows us to do is to expand the distribution of the great game that you're a season ticket holder of. So you're going to see us next year improving production qualities to be able to really highlight the sport and the athleticism and the grace and physicality of our athletes. But you'll also see us doing more deals to put the game out on multiple different channels and platforms.
That's great. I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. How are you balancing your branded partnerships? Consumer good brands are really becoming very metric focused now, right? Just getting onto digital and just social blasts are kind of over now. And, they're looking for very, very focused, targeted, branded audiences. Are you able to get or balance their needs plus obviously your ownership needs, which probably want to have local branded advertising also? How are you, navigating that? If you can talk.
For the league, it's a bit of a work in progress for us. Before I came, the league never had a commercial strategy. Seriously. I couldn't believe my eyes. 30-year-old league never had a commercial sponsorship strategy. Never
minor
had a
detail.
minor detail, little thing.
Detail.
Never had a broadcast strategy. Never had a social media strategy. Had a database of 4,000 people. Today, 1 million. So I call the NLL my 30-year startup business. That's my project now. It's extraordinary that this league has stayed in business for 30 years. And the reason why is because the content was so good in the arena that owners were able to sell a ticket to it and generate enough beer and food sales to make a good business out of it. Most of our teams are making money, believe it or not. So now what's the challenge for us is to unlock this now, and that's what I meant by unlock, to get it out to more people, to more folks that can get excited by the dynamics of the content. So it's a bit of a work in progress. We're, one of our commitments to ownership was we weren't going to take inventory away from you locally. So you keep your inventory, your dasher boards, your local TV, that's 100% the teams. I didn't want to take inventory away from them. But with Brian and the creation of NLL TV, NLL Productions in Toronto, we're creating new inventory on a national scale that our Chief Revenue Officer, Kevin Morgan, is out pitching endemic and non-endemic sponsors on this new inventory, which is NLL TV, Twitter Game of the Week, and more to come. We will have more teams in the league in the coming years. It's a big focus. We'll have a bigger footprint. The other thing we're doing is we're elongating the schedule. We were typically started in January, ended in April. You'll see next year us starting as early as November, going to April, and then as we add more teams in the US and maybe a couple more in Canada, you'll see a very similar schedule footprint to the NHL, and we'll be elongating our schedule so that sponsors could activate across more months of the year.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Brian. It's been great.
All right, everybody. So we've got a break for lunch.